I think my friend poisoned me and wants to eat me. I know this sub is usually just for scary stories and encounters, but I could really use some advice too, and I didn't know where else to post, and feel this suits this sub best. I have had this friend who I've known for many years, but was never close to. Recently, coming back from university for summer, I went back home and stayed with my parents. There isn't much to do in my hometown except for hang out with friends and smoke or drink, so that's exactly what I did. While hanging out with my friends I ran into the guy, let's call him Soph. Soph has always seemed like a chill guy, typical 19-year-old man who studies business, living off of daddy's money since he comes from a wealthy family. As soon as we reconnected we developed a closer friendship. He started hosting at his house and my friends and I would go. When we smoked he frequently brought up his fantasies of killing and eating someone. Of course all of us being high would just laugh it off and considered it to be shock humor. However, he would never laugh while making these jokes. We, my friends, had agreed he was pretty creepy, but we chalked it up to him just being too high. That is until I started hanging out with him alone. We have a pretty small friend group that hangs out nearly every day. Soph and I stay up pretty late after everyone's left, usually until the sun comes up, which is how we got so close, because it would just be us at the end of the night and he would drive me home. On one of those nights we were with a group of friends and decided we would all take edibles. For context, we were at Soph's house. 3 hours into it when all of us are pretty gone, Soph starts going on a tangent about how it would feel to pluck someone's eyeballs out. He starts going into detail and my other friend asked him to stop talking because it was making him uncomfortable. He always did this, but this time he really went into detail, explaining imagery. Someone quickly changed the subject and the night went on. About an hour later my friend and I decided to look at the fridge for the munchies. As we look in the fridge for shit to eat, I feel someone put their arm around my neck, and I feel something quite heavy putting pressure on it, and as I look down, I realize Soph is holding a knife to my neck and holding my other friend with his other free hand. "What are you guys doing?" he asks. Keep in mind, we are all very high, so I start laughing it off and going along with what I thought was a joke. As my friend and I answer him I realize he still hasn't pulled the knife off my neck, and that he was in fact holding it closer, to the point where I started to cough. Thankfully the knife was quite dull, but it was still a massive kitchen knife. As soon as I realize he isn't letting go, I let out a scream, nothing too loud or alarming. I was hoping he would also assume I was joking. He then lets go and walks away. The night goes on and we quickly forget about what happened. Soph offers to drive my friend and I home at the end of the night when everyone's left. My friend and I didn't have a car or money, so we accepted. On the drive home, stopped at a red light, he made my friend get out and check if the car was damaged because he had seen someone bump it while driving. Neither my friend nor I saw this, but my friend got out the car anyway and checks. As he tries to open the back door to get in the car again, Soph locks it. The light has now turned green and thank God it was only 5 a.m. because there were only 2 or 3 other cars around, but they all started beeping and swerving as to not hit the car or my friend. As my friend and I are yelling for him to open the door, he drives a couple inches forward, putting the tire on my friend's foot. He then unlocks the door and watches my friend yell at him for being trapped under the tire. I look over to Soph, and I see him hysterically laughing and putting the car in reverse for my friend to get in. Once we get back onto the road he starts driving like crazy, which isn't unusual for him, but he was a lot more reckless that morning. Now, before you all judge me for staying friends with such a weird and dangerous man, keep in mind it had never been this bad before. He just said really weird shit every now and then, but I honestly thought it was an intrusive thoughts thing. I struggle with mental health and have the most vile and weird intrusive thoughts, so I thought that was it. And as for the night I have mentioned, we were all really high on edibles, so although I was very weirded out, I thought he must have just been super high, and so was I, so I convinced myself I was overreacting. Then one night we go to a party together. We then got back in the car for an after party, but on the way realized it had been cancelled. Soph then asked me if I wanted to go back to his house, eat something, watch a movie and smoke. It was still really early in the night, so I agreed knowing I wouldn't be asleep for a while. We pull up, he tells me to make myself comfortable and he's going to cook us some pasta, so I sit down, turn on a movie and wait. He comes back out with the pasta and I eat almost all of it, and a few minutes into the movie, I start feeling very ill. I mention this to Soph and he says it's probably just because I drank, but I only drank very little at the party, which was around 3 hours ago at this point, and haven't thrown up or felt nauseous from alcohol in years. As time goes on I keep feeling worse and practically beg him to take me home. He refuses because he is in his house. However, this is the first time he's declined taking me home. At this point I get a really bad feeling along with the sickness, and my body decided I had to get out of there. I thankfully had some money with me, so I ordered a cab and went home. In the cab on the way home I started vomiting out the window because of how much pain my stomach was in. I get home and I just collapse, but I am unable to fall asleep because of how much pain I am in. Then I start thinking about all the times he's mentioned the desire to kill someone and eat them. He always talked about how he would eat a girl's thigh because he believes it would be the juiciest. How he would only eat a girl and not a boy. Since that day I've kept my distance, but I've been fighting with myself internally asking, did I get poisoned or did I just drink too much? Is he a psychopath or just a little weird? I truly don't know, so please any advice is appreciated. As I've mentioned, I've been friends with him for years and developed a close relationship, and I do love him as a friend, just not enough to get eaten. Have you ever broken up with a man because of his Johnson? If so, why? The last guy I dated had a Johnson like a fucking traffic cone. It started off a bit smaller than average at the top and would eventually widen out to be as thick as a Coke can, it seemed. It was maybe 5 inches long, but went from like a 4-inch girth head to like 8-inch girth base. So anyway, one day he decided to just thrust his whole shit into me without getting me truly prepared. I bled. It was awful. Never again. It was for more reasons than just his Johnson, but I deduced later that it had to be his Johnson that caused me to have multiple issues with my kitty. I never had a UTI before we met, never had an abnormal pap, and didn't have a lot of bladder infections. The 2 years we dated I had more bladder infections and UTIs than most people have in their lifetime. I had 2 abnormal paps and had to get a cervical biopsy. Thankfully it came back fine. I shit you not, since we broke up I have never had an issue again. I have no idea what the cause was, but I chalk it up to my body telling me to get that Johnson away from it. Once dated a guy that didn't wash it as well. Ever. Nobody wants to be giving a blow job that has texture. Today I fucked up by calling out another man's name while I slept by my girlfriend. So my partner and I have been together for almost 4 years, and of course I love her. She is the woman I am going to marry and the only person I want to be with. Also, not that you'll believe me, but I am straight. While I consider myself an ally, I am not gay. I'm not opposed to the idea of bisexuality, but I'm just not into dudes like that, so I don't think I am. I just had a really great dream last night. Last night I had an epic romantic dream. It was some forbidden love where I was in love with a man. The dream was seriously like a movie. I mean, it was awesome. Nothing NSFW happened either, well, unless you count passionate kissing as NSFW, but it wasn't a dirty dream, at all. It was just romantic and epic. And I should be allowed to enjoy when my brain serves me movies at night. But where I fucked up is that I apparently said the man's name out loud. I'll be honest, didn't even remember the dude's name. But my girlfriend sure did. She asked me about Julio and why I kept calling for him last night. I thought it'd be funny if I said the man of my dreams, cause I mean technically true. But she did not seem amused, so I downplayed it a bit and didn't mention how much I enjoyed the dream. She didn't even like that joke. How would I tell her that I had an affair with a man in my dream? She then accused me of being closeted and said I needed to sort my shit out. Because dreams are what the subconscious wants or thinks, and insisted that it didn't sound like an innocent dream. Which again, nothing sexual happened, other than passionate kissing, and also it was only a dream. And like I told her, I've had dreams where I'm an actual elephant. I don't want to be an elephant. I don't know what her deal is, man. I hope she gets over it soon, cause Julio will sweep me off my feet. I almost got abducted and a strange noise saved my life. This happened a few years ago around mid-November. My mother and I love being outside and going for walks. This night in particular was freezing, but we decided we wanted to go out for a quick walk. As we walked back home, we went down this one street that we use all the time. It's a neighborhood street that leads to the main street, then back into our neighborhood. We get halfway down the street when I hear a dog bark over the music on my phone. I turn it off and turn to look for the dog because I love dogs and I wasn't aware there was a big dog on the street. Context: I know quite a few people on this street, and I know which houses have dogs. Most of the people on the block have small dogs or cats. This came from a house that didn't have a dog, let alone a big dog. I spun around and saw a big dark mass just feet from me. If he stepped 2 more feet he would have been able to grab me. I immediately felt weird and started speed walking back to my mom, who at that point didn't realize I stopped. I turned off my phone and whispered to her that I thought we were being followed. She turned around and grabbed my arm and told me there was 2 men right behind us. We started walking in a zigzag pattern and sure enough they followed our every step. Once they caught on that we knew one of the dudes started to make small chit-chat with us. Awfully late for you girls to be walking, huh? I swear his voice sounded like the definition of the sirens' voices, luring sailors to their doom. He continued asking questions to us. My mom kept walking and replying with quick replies. From the sound of his voice I knew we were in danger, so I went to dial 911. Instead my mom told me to call my dad as he would be able to get to us quicker because we were almost home. We got to the busy street and looked behind us to see them speed walking to us. We decided to risk and ran into the middle of the street as cars passed on either side of us. We ran across again and met my dad on that side. We looked across the street and both men were gone. We got into the car and searched the streets, but these guys disappeared into what seemed like this air. I asked my mom if we would have been kidnapped if I hadn't heard the dog. She asked me what dog. I asked her how she didn't hear this massive dog bark, especially with how good her hearing is. I still have no clue what it was I heard, but I do know it most likely saved my life. Men of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing a woman has ever said to you? I just wanted to see if you'd stay now. The reason this was fucking crazy is because preceding that I got a text from her saying she maybe missed a period. I said something like, oh okay, so what if you're pregnant? She volunteered an abortion. Cool, good shit. I don't have to worry about raising a kid at 16. Keep in mind we weren't even sure yet that she was pregnant. So then suddenly she texts me saying maybe she changed her mind and she would want to keep it if she were pregnant. So I reasonably asked what changed. She says she just might want to keep the kid if she's pregnant and I keep sort of driving after it. Okay, but what's different between now and an hour or 2 ago when you brought up an abortion? She accuses me of pressuring her, calls me an asshole, and stops responding to my texts. A day or two later she tells me she wasn't ever even pregnant in the first place and says I just wanted to see if you'd stay. That's why she said she went through all that shit, and I guess her not knowing the kind of person I am, made that okay for her to do. God, I wish I ended it there. Story 2. A few years ago I started hanging out with this girl who was around my friend group at the time, and came to trivia nights with us occasionally. Things were going well at first, but then I started noticing some odd signs. She never slept, she would do bizarre things like start her shower, then go start cooking food, then sit down and begin tending her plants as if she kept forgetting what task she was doing. She put a sign out on her lawn with her cell phone number on it wanting to connect with strangers. It got weirder as it went on. I mentioned to her once that I liked thunderstorms and she became convinced that I could cause thunderstorms. At first I thought she was joking, but it started to weird me out. Then one night when I was sleeping over I noticed that she was just sitting in bed watching me. She put her hand on my heart and whispered that she could hear the beautiful fishes in my blood. That very morning, her father burst into her apartment yelling about her appointment with the psychiatrist that she kept avoiding. She told me that her parents and the doctors were trying to convince her that she had bipolar disorder, and wanted to shut her brain off. Long story short, her friends and family convinced her to go. She bravely took on her mental illness and got help before the manic episode got out of control, and now we are very close friends to this day. What are some NSFW secrets about the military? If you join the military you will be affected by sewer slide. We had 3 during training, 1 on the boat, 1 I had to tackle one of my officers because he was slashing his wrists. Then you get out and it keeps happening. I've lost 8 shipmates in the last 7 years after I got out. It's nuts. Our Air Force's most critical asset, nuclear weapons, are primarily guarded by a bunch of really bored teenagers. Sometimes the guy that administers the drug test is the same one that you get the drugs from. Been in for a long while now. The most accurate descriptor I've heard is the gayest bunch of straight dudes you'll ever meet. Swingers exist on every single base in the world. In Sigonella they would use different boxes of detergent in the windows to show what they were into and what age range they were looking for. Patrolling the housing area became much more interesting when you see who lives in the houses and what they're into. I was selected 6 times in a row to be a urinalysis checker. Have seen over 2,000 Johnsons involuntarily. When I checked into Fort Bragg in 2011, I was told in the in-processing brief was welcome to Fort Bragg. We have the most male-on-male ropes and SA in the nation. That was the very first thing they told me. I've been continuously stalked for the last 15 years. So I'm a 28-year-old woman and this happened to me when I was 13. I'm an adult now and still kind of traumatized. For a little context, at 13 I transferred schools because of lack of money. This school I went to was a cheaper private school because where I lived the public one sucked. I didn't have any friends for at least the first couple of months. I started noticing this boy, Victor. He was always staring at me during classes, in the hallways by the window, and at lunch. It was an everyday thing, but I didn't care because as a kid I only thought of stupid stuff like dolls or whatever. Oh, and one more thing, I was flat as a table back then, so totally looked like a small child. The girls in my class started saying that Victor had a crush on me, which creeped the hell out of me because he was 18. I was creeped out but still didn't care, as long as he didn't approach me or anything. But things escalated quickly. Victor would follow me home every day. Thank God I moved since then and he doesn't know where I live anymore. The most annoying thing however was that he constantly asked his friends to try to talk to me and try to convince me to go out with him and make out with him after school. These talks would usually take about 30 minutes of them trying so hard to convince me to agree with this. While Victor was behind them watching the conversation like a freak. Obviously I rejected him all the time, but being the nice guy that he said he was, he spread rumors about us making out anyway. Nobody believed anyway because he was such a weird guy and the whole school knew it. The final straw was when our school had a trip to a book fair. I was super excited. At this point I had made a couple of friends. On our way to this fair, I was on the bus with my friend and Victor was on 3 seats behind us and I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. Out of nowhere he came and asked for my friend's cell phone and she gave it to him. So stupid of her. He returned her cell phone not even 2 minutes after. She checked the cell phone and showed me he had taken a bunch of photos of me. I guess this was his way of saying that he had already done this at some point. She got so pissed and went to go talk to him. When she returned she said the creepiest thing I've heard in my life. She said this with a very scared face. He said to me that when you least expect it he will push you into a bathroom and rope you. Today. The only thing that went through my mind was, what should I do now? I looked at him and he gave me a creepy smile. After this I spent the whole day looking behind my back, not leaving the side of my teacher. She didn't even understand why I didn't want to walk around at the fair. I was in alert mode all the time and thank God nothing happened. When I came home I cried in my room like a baby. This was at the end of the year and thankfully I switched schools again. I told this to my mom last year, and she was like, yeah, it happens. It happened to me too when I was your age. So shocked about how this is such a common thing. I'm now 28 and I still see Victor on the streets. He has followed me around a few times. I always walk in circles until I lose him, but sometimes he waits for me outside the stores or restaurants. I think about what would have happened to me in the book fair if I didn't have my teacher next to me the whole time. And I wondered if one day he'll do something or just keep this creepy behavior. Today I fucked up by having sex, twisting a testicle and ending up with cancer. This all started 2 weeks ago. After some nighttime activity with my wife, I was getting up out of the bed to go clean myself up. Upon getting out of bed, I got this strong pain in my testicles. I reached down and felt that my right testicle had twisted. The most alien thing you can ever feel is a testicle sideways down there. This wasn't the first time it had happened. Over the course of the last decade I've done this probably twice. So leaving this twisted would mean cut off blood flow to my testicle, and ending up in hospital. Being ever so slightly medically inclined, I decided the best course of action was to twist it back to its proper position. I lay down and proceeded to untwist my testicle. I went to sleep and thought nothing more about it. Over the coming days I still had a lingering pain down there. I booked an appointment for my doctor to go get checked out. The appointment comes, the doctor has a good feel and says that everything is in the right place. But since I was still having pain, they suggested an ultrasound and a referral to a urologist. I had suggested getting that testicle stitched into place to stop this happening again, and they agreed this was a good idea. Ultrasound comes and goes, tech doesn't report on anything, but that evening the doctor calls and says based upon what they've seen they're glad I'm seeing a urologist. This should have alarmed me more at the time, but alas it didn't. I'd gotten a urology appointment 2 days later. Somehow I'd managed to get an appointment at short notice. The weekend passes, and I go to the urologist. They look at the ultrasound results, and believe what they're seeing is the result of the twisted testicle. They also agree that getting it stitched in place is the right course of action. They decide getting scheduled with a surgeon is next and get their staff to get me on the books. At this point in time I'm thinking to myself that I'd done some damage, but with a few stitches my testicle wouldn't twist again. Some minor discomfort to save me having that feeling again was worth it. They find me a slot with the surgeon by luck the following morning. I turn up to the hospital again. The surgeon comes in and proceeds to greet me and have a good feel of my balls. He says it's an odd way to meet someone, but this is his life. When he brings up the ultrasound he says there's something else in there. It wasn't damage, it was a tumor. The surgeon's first step was to get me in for a CT scan, which after what seemed like an hour waiting, they had scheduled for the next morning. I go for some blood work, go home and head to the hospital the next morning for my CT. That goes off without a hitch. I get a call from the surgeon in the afternoon confirming his suspicions. The blood work shows testicular cancer, but the CT doesn't show any spread outside of the testicle. Surgery was then scheduled for 2 days later. Surgery has since come and gone. I'm here icing what used to be my right testicle. In a couple of weeks I'll have repeat bloods to see if I still have cancer indicators. Fingers crossed I don't.